Joe Morrobel, my best friend and business partner, making you the co-founder of Profit Driven Marketing. How are you?
All good, thank you, my friend. All good.
I'm asking you that as a formality, in that I normally start the podcast that way.
Yeah.
But we've obviously been spending the past few days together anyway. Your first time in Dubai.
Yeah.
How have you been finding it so far?
It's lovely, mate. I think I'd like to say, first and foremost, very proud of what you're doing here, Theo. I know it's something you've been wanting to do for a very long time. So I just wanted to start with that first. But yeah, Dubai, I think I've only been here for a few days, so I can't put my finger on it. Beautiful place, beautiful people. I think it fits you very well. I think I'm going to have to give a full recap on my Dubai experience. I think from what I've seen so far, it's as much as there's a lot going on, you can find peace in a lot of it. You know, the evenings that we've spent together, kind of sitting in the marina, very lovely experience. I think it would be great to see the different sides to Dubai. I think I've seen it directly through your lens. I think it would be good to kind of explore and maybe myself suggest a few different things to do, just maybe stuff that you haven't even done, just to get kind of explore the full scope of Dubai. So yeah, I would say it's an amazing place, amazing people. And again, I think the biggest thing, and you know me, I like to find peace. And I think it is a very peaceful place. As much as there's a lot going on, you can find that in a lot of areas. So yeah. Beautiful.
For sure. There's so much of it you haven't seen. We've only been here, you got here Friday.
Saturday.
It's now Saturday morning you got here, didn't you? And it's now Monday, so it's really just been 48 hours or so. So you've seen the beach clubs and that side of things. You've seen the marina, got to experience a bit of that, but we've still not even been downtown, seen the Burj, we've not seen the desert. There's even things I haven't done. So like you say, plenty of exploring left to do. But yeah, we've got a whole week ahead of us, so plenty of things we can get lined up. But what I'd really like to do is, of course, get on to profit-driven marketing, how that started for us, what our journey's been like. I think a lot of people can pull a lot of value, whether or not they're involved in the industry or not, but just from our knowledge and experience on e-commerce, on digital advertising. But really, before we get into profit-driven marketing, I think there's a slight story before that, which is learning a bit more about you, because you've been in the advertising industry for longer than before I even knew what paid ads were. You know, I think you were very young when you got involved in the advertising industry. Would it be right to say 10 years now, probably?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
How did all of that start for you? How old were you? And how did you get involved in the industry?
So I was I've always loved the online space. You know, ever since I was young, I was always trying to get the computer off my parents. So I'd have my certain amount of time I could be on there. And whilst I'm on there, I'll try to cram in as much as I possibly can. But where I kind of got into the advertising space and just kind of marketing in general was actually through family. So my dad had a home improvements company, and he was kind of struggling to get recognition. So we originally lived in London. When we moved here, lived in London. And then when we moved down to Kent, he was kind of struggling to get work. Prior to that, he kind of worked for different companies, set up his own home improvements company. And through word of mouth, it was working, but it just didn't have the scale to kind of support the family. So had to kind of find a way to broadcast that message. And I'd been kind of researching online that exact problem, right? It starts with trying to solve a family problem. What is the best way for him to get his business online? And the first thing I saw was a website. So I was like, okay, let me start doing that. So I proposed to him. I said, I'm going to fix the problem. I'm going to bring the money into the house. I'm going to build you a website.
And how old were you at this point?
I was probably just turning 15, around about then. Yeah. So started learning how to code a little bit. Then round about that point, actually, it started to have a lot of the builders come into play. So I didn't need to use it too much, but it was handy. So went ahead and built him a website. And then my dad being my dad, once I built the website, he was like, okay, it looks pretty and great, but how is this actually going to bring me any business? And then I thought to myself, okay, maybe it's a little bit more difficult than I thought it was, as you know. So then what I did actually was started trying to rank some of the pages online. So SEO, started to grab some of the keywords. And back then it was very easy, especially in like an area like Kent, to kind of get that visibility with these keywords. There was loads of black hat is what you would call it, techniques to rank higher. So started to do that, started to rank on Google Maps, which started to get leads, but it was very hit and miss, right? We didn't really have any control on it. It was just based on how well we was ranking, how much visibility we had that month, but it was very difficult to kind of like increase the flow. So when I first got him set up on that, he was very impressed that now he's getting business in, right? And some of these businesses were closing quite well, or some of these jobs, sorry. But then I found Google Ads. And then that's where it kind of all changed. And I was able to essentially, initially when I proposed it to him, he was like, there is no way I'm spending any money to bring it in. And then I was kind of trying to calculate the cost. Like, look, if you're getting these bathroom jobs that are going to generate you 4 or 5 grand, realistically, we can be getting leads at X amount, like doing all the manual calculations based off CPC. So got that set up, and then he started to have leads come in, which was great. But again, it was solely based on the demand that was coming in when people were actually looking for it. So again, I kind of run into another hurdle where it's like, Joe, it's slowed down. What can we do? And I was like trying to increase the bids on it, and it wasn't, all we was doing was pay more per lead. So I was kind of magically introduced, right time, right place type thing, to Facebook ads, meta ads. And then I could almost just increase, regardless of the demand, I could just increase visibility. So it was front of mind when people were actually looking for someone to do the job. So really kind of just went full force with that. And then we was able to get somewhat of a consistent stream of leads, people directly messaging him. It was a little bit challenging initially because it would be like a mixture of jobs. It would be low value job, higher value jobs. It was kind of a lot to handle. But over time, once you kind of find a good customer base, you can find those ones that need a lot of repeat business or own multiple properties. And then that's kind of the avenue we went into. So yeah, that was when I was about 15 years old, leading into about 17, where I started to take some of that money and start trading, which is what allowed me to kind of support myself for a good period of time. And then I'm trying to think, work it all backwards. Time goes so fast, but round about then, so 17, maybe till I was about 20, 21 years old, I kind of left the marketing space a little bit and was able to support myself via trading, which was quite good, which I studied for a long time. It didn't just go straight to that. I studied, I had a little bit of money into invest and kind of support myself from that, and would have little jobs on the side, etc. But that was able to support me for some time. But what I really liked about the marketing space was almost the consistency of it. I knew if I was in a good industry and I could get all of the data, I was able to kind of really calculate my return quite well, quite consistently, which was the most important thing for me, because in the beginning stage, I feel like I had quite a lot of luck with trading, which a lot of people do. And then when you get a little bit more money, you invest a lot more. And I found that over time, if I wasn't able to stick to my plan and emotion would come into play, it would kind of disrupt the whole thing, which we've spoke on, many times.
Even the same with business, isn't it? If you can't control your emotion, there are ups and downs in business. Definitely. There's times where you're feeling stressed or, I was going to say unhappy. I don't think unhappy is the word, but there can be so many different things that happen in business. There are ups and downs, and it really can pull on those emotions sometimes. Definitely. I think the way I first described my e-commerce experience was like an emotional roller coaster.
It is.
Because you get that first sale, or you start running the ads and you start getting the good ROAS and all of these things that are very, very exciting. But then there's also the flip side, revenue drops, or there's always, you've got to be so fluid in business. For sure. So I can see how it would be the same in trading, if not even more emotional, because
100%.
You're watching your money either go up or down. I guess the only thing in trading is you've got the benefit of setting that stop loss, right? Yep. So you can minimize the risk, exactly. I guess, or the loss.
I think the stop loss when it comes to trading is something that you can keep quite consistent. I think what people struggle with most is the take profit. I think, when you see that, big candle going up, the green candle going up, and you see your money go from, there's so many psychological things with it. Even the fact where you're in a positive, your money's green. I think these psychologically just really takes over people, and you see it going up and up and up and up, and you get these big spikes. I remember when we would trade the London opening, and you would have that big spike, London opening, or when interest rates would come in, and you'd have your kind of take profits in place. But there's periods of time where I really kind of consider, like before the London opening, should I move it a little bit higher? And there's many, many times where that's caught me out, and you miss that take profit, and then you just hit that stop loss, and they do stack.
I think we actually spoke about this yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we weren't talking specifically on, well, I guess we were talking on trading, but more so crypto, and about the importance of having a plan and sticking to that plan. Because like you say, it's so easy to you let your emotions get the better of you. And like you say, when you see that big green candle and then you hop on Twitter and everyone's going, hold, it's going to pump, and it's going to, everyone says, they like the round numbers, don't they? It's going to $1, it's going to $100. But I think we were speaking about the importance of actually setting a game plan. And I think this also relates to business, but I'm going to keep it on the topic of trading at the moment, just because that's kind of where we've got onto. But, you know, when you are going to invest in something, whether that be a business or whether that be a particular cryptocurrency or a stock, you need to have that strategy. You need to have that game plan. You need to remove all of the emotion from it, to which point you're just following a blueprint that you've crafted. 100%. And what I mean by that is setting your take profits, setting your stop losses if you can, if it's on a normal exchange and not one that's decentralized or something like that. But yeah, most importantly, being confident in the decisions that you're making, make that plan and stick to it. And I'd say it's the same for business, but in business, you also have to be very fluid and ready to pivot at any time. But we've gone on a little bit of a tangent there, as we always do. Yeah. But you took it as far as maybe the age of 20, and you said you were trading. You did that a bit on your own for a little while, and then I think you ended up joining a company for some time as well, right?
Yeah. I did. So at that point, I needed to. So actually, that kind of happened prior. So when I was about 17, 18 years old, I joined a company in London that provided funded accounts, which was great. I think the only problem that I found with that was these companies make you use their strategy, and I felt like, and a lot of people do, but I felt like I had more of my own edge when I would use my own. So I kind of wanted to stick to that, and what I would do is essentially trade on their plan and then take that and then move it into my own account and then trade on mine. But what I found over time was I was just making more money from mine, and you had to dedicate a certain amount of time to theirs, and I felt like it kept conflicting. And then they actually called me in and they noticed, I don't know how actually to this day, but they noticed that I was also trading on a separate account, which apparently was a breach of their conditions as well. So I kind of had the decision to make: either I stop trading on my own for now and trade on theirs, or leave. And I decided to do exactly that.
Yeah, and I do want to let you continue, but there was one thing I wanted to say there, which I think is also very relatable to business and something we've discovered recently, is you said they wanted you to trade for a certain amount of time.
Yep.
And I'd have thought that trading is probably one of them things that sometimes the more time you spend on it, the more you're going to look into something more and more, and maybe keep changing your opinion based on a chart or what you can potentially see, when actually maybe you only need to spend half hour, trust your gut, take that initial analysis. If you're spending more time on something than you need to, that is then going to let your mind run and maybe even end up giving you some confliction.
100%.
And making irrational decisions.
Definitely.
You know, I think, and the reason I'll relate that back to business is because I'm guilty of it, where I always used to work in, 9 to 5, and even when starting our own business, I've stuck to that routine. If anything, we work even longer than that a lot of the time, and I'm trying to now work less, but be a bit smarter and make smarter decisions, and not just open my laptop and start doing something for the sake of doing something to feel like I'm being productive. When I think something we've discovered recently is actually the way that a business owner can be most productive is making them key decisions and really analysing the business top level. But it just caught my attention the way you explained about how at that company they wanted you to trade for a certain amount of time. And we see it even now at Profit Driven Marketing with our employees. Sometimes by putting them on an hourly rate, all that means is they take longer to do the job that if they were on a fixed price term, they would probably find a way to get it done quicker. So it can be quite conflicting.
Yeah, it is a balancing act. I think to your point with time on stuff, well, firstly with the trading, actually, the time had more correlation to the opening times of each area.
Oh, you had to work at a specific time.
Specific time, but still there was a certain amount of time that I would have to be doing it for. It was correlated around that, but I only really need to be there for 5 minutes, but they would expect an hour. So really there kind of was that time restraint on it. But I think I've always said it, and I think even when I had this with my dad initially, and we've spoke on this as well, I think the time that you spend on things is actually in correlation to the problem that you have to solve. And sometimes it feels like you're beating a dead horse if you stay there for too long. I tend to work best when I understand the problem I need to solve. I create a plan. I then maybe actually step away from it a sec and think if there's anything else I would do on top of that plan. And then I go and tackle it. And then I run it until I feel at a point where you kind of get that brain fog. And then I step away, head to the gym, get those endorphins, come back, and I can normally continue to solve the problem. But I think sometimes the more time you spend on the problem, I don't think it doesn't always get you there quicker. There's always smarter ways you can do it. And I think we always speak on this as well.
I know what does get you there quicker, and that's pressure, time pressure.
Yeah.
If you need to get something done by a certain amount of time, that also makes a massive difference. Definitely. I think it just, I don't know what it does, but when you know you need to get something done in a certain amount of time or by a certain time, you always get it done. No matter what the challenge is. It's strange. Not that I like to rely on that, but it's almost like a backup. You know, if it needs to get done by a certain amount of time, we will solve it. We will get it done. So I think, taking time away to think is extremely important. Sometimes you don't even have the time. You just got to get it done, exactly. You know, but we always do. It's pressure. Funny how it works. Exactly. Pressure.
I think when I say take the time away, I think it's when you're solving problems that you may have not solved before. I think for us, there's certain times where pressure works extremely well. We know how, let's just say as an example, we have, to speak on the topic of our business here, we have an audit to do, right? If the audit is proposed for the following week, then it's very likely that we're going to spread that time across that whole week we have until the point of the audit. But if the audit is tomorrow, I guarantee we've smashed something out in the morning, we've gone through it together in the afternoon, and it's prepared by the end of the day because we know the system. I think when you don't understand the system, it's sometimes important to step yourself away, because if you put a time restraint on it, you might not give it your all, and you just find the ways to get there quickest. Whereas if it's like I say, if it's a problem you've never solved before, sometimes it makes sense to build a plan. I think something I've learned, it's very important to reevaluate a plan rather than create a plan and then immediately take action. There's time and place for it, especially if you've never solved it before. Create the plan, step away, think on it, and then you might come back with some stuff that's like, oh no, I'll tweak that, I'll optimize that, I'll make that a little bit better. And I think we speak on this in many, many different things, but a pure example of this would be, you know, when we propose something to a client or a potential client, after the point in which we've done so, we step away, reevaluate it, and then we always find extra things that we can do to make it a little bit better. I think it's very important on the topic of a plan, actually. I think it's always very important to have a plan, because you do then rely on that rather than the emotional aspect of it. You always kind of have these rough guidelines to work within. I think it's important, man, because a lot of people actually just solely run their life on emotion, and it becomes extremely difficult to do that. Emotion and motivation. And motivation, in my opinion, is not the best thing to rely on. I think when we say like these motivational videos and stuff online, sometimes you need them to get you out the dirt, but you shouldn't rely on them. You need habits in place and a plan in place that you can rely on. And then a motivation just gives you those spikes up, but it doesn't bring you from down to up, down, up, down, up. You need habits and a plan which creates the habits. And then the motivation just gives you those kind of like big swings up.
Yeah, 100%. I think emotion and, I slipped my mind. What was the other thing you said? Motivation. Yep. Emotion and motivation, neither of them are constant.
No.
But what you can control, like what you've just said, is your habits and also the plan. And there's a saying, isn't it? I don't know the full saying, but it's ultimately that you reap what you sow.
Yep.
And if you know the inputs that you need to put in, as in the daily habits, to achieve the long-term plan, then it really just becomes a thing of habit building and doing those daily inputs. And what it should look like then is almost like a nice graph working towards the plan. Yep. It's never quite like that. There's always some zigzags because you can't avoid certain variables. and emotions and motivation. You know, we are only human at the end of the day. We all have ups and downs. As much as we'll try to remain constant and control them with our daily inputs and our plans, there are certain aspects of your life that you have to just run with it, how it is. How well did you sleep last night? How tired are you today? You know, there's so many different things that come a part of it.
And I think on that, it's important to track it. I think I've always said to you, I've preached the journal, just to really tap into how you truly feel about everything, what you're doing. Because I think when you have everything in your head, you don't realize actually how much is that going on up there. And the more you note down, it actually gets a lot quieter. So for people that really do struggle with like going round and round in their mind, it's very important, in my opinion, to pen to pad or however you want to do it, but just note it down. And then all of a sudden your mind comes a lot quieter. I found that my mind is the loudest when I wake up and before I go to sleep, or when I'm trying to go to sleep. There's a lot going on in your mind. So the first thing when I wake up, I try to, firstly from a work perspective, jot everything down. But I have two things. I kind of have like my morning work notes of anything that's just on my mind work-wise, and then I just have my personal notes, how I feel, what's going on, if there's anything I want to talk to you personally about, or the team, or whoever. I think it's extremely important to do that. And before you go to sleep, you know, you've had this full day of all of this stuff going on. As you get towards the end of the day, you're kind of tired, get in that gym, you get them endorphins. And then when you get home eating your dinner, like stuff just goes round in your mind, especially as a business owner. You're thinking of this problem I need to solve for a client, or you're thinking of something on a team perspective, or this system I need to build. If you just have that going around in your mind, you're going to then struggle to sleep. And then if you struggle to sleep, your next day isn't going to be as good. So I think it's very important as a business owner, or as any individual really, to really kind of just track what you're doing. And then you don't need to rely as much on the motivation or on your emotions to keep you in check. You have a structure to your life. And I think we're big advocates of structure. I think it's extremely important, because then it's a difficult act. I think you don't want to be so restricted on your life when you're kind of noting everything down to a T. Some people work well like that. Some people do actually struggle when it's really restrictive, which I do like the balance of it being restrictive and non-restrictive. But I think there's just key things that you should try to just keep on top of, which, especially as your emotion, I don't think you should just let your emotion go away with the wind. I think you should, if you feel a certain type of way, note it down and work out why. And I think we always do that in anything. It's like, what is the why behind all of these things, rather than it just being what it is? Why is it the way that it is? And I think I always start with emotion first, because, as you know, emotional individual. And I think it's very important, if you are an emotional individual, to keep on top of it, because what will happen over time is certain emotions will really stack up and you won't even know how you got there. And it takes so long to kind of work it all backwards. So I think it's very important, like, start today. Start noting down, how do you feel right now? Whilst you're listening to this, how do you feel? What are you thinking? Note it down. And then an hour from now or later on today, how do you feel? Is it any different to how you felt before? A lot of the time, you'll think there's a big problem going on in your mind or your life, but you note it down, you put why and how you think you're going to resolve it. And all of a sudden, it's a lot smaller than it ever was. People let problems become extremely big in their mind. The mind is a very powerful thing, but I think you almost need to, the same way we do, like when it comes to ads or anything, when you're looking at it on the surface, it seems like there's a lot going on. But as soon as you kind of note down everything that's happened and you have a structure of doing so, you can make it very clear and understand how you can solve a lot of those problems going on.
Sure. I think that's really, really important. And there was so much stuff I wanted to touch on there, but you kept going and going, and it was getting better and better. So I wanted to kind of leave you to it. I never like to interrupt anyone.
Yeah, appreciate it.
But I think the key thing there, although there was a lot of things, the one I'm going to touch on is people often won't address the problem, and that's why they get bigger. Because we all have problems in our lives, some bigger than others, some are small problems, but if you don't deal with them as they go or as you go, and you just push it to a side, or maybe rather than actually stop and think about it, you're then going to just indulge in alcohol to forget or whatever. Maybe everyone has their own way of dealing with things, dealing with pressures, but no one will attack the problem at the root cause. And I think that is why these problems then get bigger and then start affecting your emotions and then prevent you sleeping, and then you're tired and you're fatigued and you feel worse. Then you're eating bad food because you can't be bothered to cook, and it's almost just like this downward spiral. And like you say, if you don't deal with the problems, they just get worse and worse. And I think the other thing I'd like to touch on is the journaling. That's something that my mum has always encouraged me to do. And I've done it like very, very loosely at the end of like one day here or one day there, and I've never really picked up the habit of it. But she said the same thing, just at the end of each day, make a note of what went well today, how you feel. And when I have done it, it has been quite enjoyable actually, because I think in business or in life, it's very easy to get caught up in the present moment. I know I'm guilty of it, and I think you as well. We don't often stop and reflect. It's always about where we're going and how we're going to get there. And sometimes you do need that moment to stop and think, well, hold on, there's one big problem that we're trying to solve at the moment, but what about all of the other problems we've solved in the past 4 weeks? How many steps we've made in the right direction? But I think as humans and as problem solvers, it's very easy to just keep thinking about what's next and what's the next thing, and what's the next problem. But it's very important to take a moment to stop and to reflect. Otherwise you just get so caught up in this never-ending cycle. And I think sometimes it can do not more harm than good, but you have to take a moment to just stop and reflect and think about where you've gone. So yeah, two, I think, really important takeaways there is stop and think, and maybe try journaling or just try writing down how you feel and solving these problems.
I think sometimes putting a label on it as well, like journaling, a lot of these things put people away. I think if you just think about it completely different to that, I think just like pen to paper, what's on my mind. It's not even journaling. I'm just getting down what's on my mind at the moment. I think there's a lot of things, unfortunately, in this world now that put like a restraint on people and make them opposed to it. And I think we even have it, like we spoke on it. I've said it before when it comes to like our company, reaching out to businesses, etc. Let's not talk about ads, because everyone hears about ads as much as, that is that's our primary focus. A lot of people are opposed to it. People have a sour taste in their mouth, a lot of business owners, because they've been burnt, unfortunately. But I think it's important sometimes to try not to label things. I've run into it. Even myself, thinking of journaling, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to journal. But just think of it different. Like, try to always break it down to something that then you can action. If you have a sour taste in your mouth, or anything like a certain word, you're opposed to it, like work out why. Is it because journaling has a label on it and it makes you feel a certain type of way? Well, if it makes you feel a certain type of way, then just get your thoughts on paper.
That's such a powerful point, because I think we've spoken on this before. And the best way or the best example I can provide and relate it back to is the book by Mo Gawdat, The Soul for Happy. Did you ever end up listening to that?
Well, funny enough, I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but my auntie has read the book recently, and she actually, I opened my door the other day and it was on my door that she purchased it for me. It's completely changed her life. So I've listened to Drib and Drabs through our Audible, and I started to open it and read into it as well.
So the point I wanted to make was, in there's a part on it that's kind of always stuck with me. And he talks about how you need to be so careful with the words in which you associate with yourself, the way in which you present yourself, and just to relate it back to the example you gave, but I can give some others as well. Oh, I run ads. I'm a paid advertiser. Immediately, if that's the way that you present yourself, that's what someone's going to associate with you. Oh, I'm so-and-so's husband. You're then just giving away part of your identity and not showing your true self. You need to be so careful with the way in which you label yourself, but even other ways of, oh, I'm anxious, or oh, I'm depressed. Like, these words feed back into you, 100%. And the more that you say it, the more real that it becomes. If you just speak of yourself as, oh, I just run paid ads, you're then not even really presenting the true version of yourself, and you're giving yourself as a label. So you need to be so careful with the words in which you associate yourself with,
100%,
because they mean a massive thing.
They can create constraints to you as an individual.
I've said this to you. I think even the example you gave before, when you said, oh, naturally, I'm kind of introverted, and I don't really, not that you're not social, because you are these days. It's something that you've been working on more and more. But the amount of times I've said to you, like, just don't say that. Don't say you're naturally introverted. Like, I remember being very shy when I was younger. I remember most of primary school, secondary school, I'd be the guy sitting there listening, not really saying anything, unless someone directly speaks to me. And even then, I didn't really want to talk. Do I come across that way? No. But I think if you're going to keep giving yourself a label, you're just restricting yourself, and it is like a chain. You need to break the chain, stop associating these words with yourself, and then it even comes round full circle to positive affirmation and law of attraction and manifesting, which is the belief that if you believe positive things, then positive things will happen to you. And on the flip side, if you think negatively, then negative things in your life will happen. Your body and your mind really is a magnet. If you're always thinking negatively, you're going to see all the negative in everything. If 100%. You always believe positively or think positively, you'll see the positive in everything. And I think that there is so important. Just don't put labels on yourself. Be positive. And I think it's something we talk on a lot, which is perspective. You know, and I say this to Martina a lot as well. The way in which you look at things, you know, don't start your day in a negative. Oh, I'm really tired this morning, and oh, the weather's bad. Well, yeah, but you're awake, it's 6 a.m, you've got, you know, you're sipping a nice coffee, you know, we had a really good weekend. Why don't we think about the positives rather than immediately associating a negative thought with your morning?
You can always find the good in something. And not to steer the direction off on one, but I think it's very important, even when you started with Dubai and culture, etc. I think it's important to note this. Half my family is from Dominican Republic. Very, very different culture, South American culture. And even Dominica's a little bit different to South America. But you will find a happy person in pretty much any scenario, right? You could find homeless guy on the side, you could find a guy with one leg, you could find a multi-millionaire, you could find any of those people. You can find happiness in all of that, and I think they're always just trying to find the good in something. Granted, it is a beautiful Caribbean island, so they have kind of that always to rely on, but I feel like you can always find something. I think me being, obviously I live in the UK at the moment, and yes, the weather gets to me. I think that's probably like the biggest thing. But I always find something in it. I can always find something in it. Do you know what I actually really enjoy? I enjoy being indoors, and I think this actually comes from my dad, but being indoors during a thunderstorm or the rain, I appreciate it in a very different way. I look at, this is a very interesting example, but I'll look at when the ground, like especially in the summer, becomes like very brown and like the grass is dying. And it's actually almost a very interesting thing to watch, where all of a sudden it'll start raining a lot, and then over time you'll slowly see that grass turn from brown to green. I love that. And then you're seeing the beauty in something that people find horrible, if that makes sense. I think there's always ways that you can find beauty in something, and you don't need to delude yourself into believing it. Sometimes that's actually quite beneficial in some ways, but you don't need to delude yourself. But there's always something you can find. I'm a big advocate, as you know. I spend a lot of time, you know, as I'm strolling through the town, I'll sit with a homeless guy and talk through their life or what they've experienced and everything that's gone on. Those guys will always find something good in what they're doing. A lot of those guys that I meet as well or girls will be smiling, very appreciative of just sitting down and having a conversation. Nothing else really matters to them. As much as they probably want all of these little things, these little legs up in their life, they just appreciate the conversation. I think that's extremely important, and we're big advocates of it. And even speaking on this last night, love having conversation with anybody.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just going to say. That truly is what sparked this podcast, is a genuine joy for sitting down and just having interesting conversation. You know, sitting down with a coffee, another thing that we both enjoy, and just talking. I mean, you know, regardless of whether or not we were on a podcast, we'd be having the exact same conversations now.
100%.
You know, and in true fashion, we've digressed massively away from your journey.
I'm good for that.
Yeah. So if we are to get back on track, is we got as far as you trading, and then would it be fair to say the next step was when you then entered the marketing agency, SV?
100%. So I then applied for a job online. I found that I could only get myself, and it's very different now, but I felt like I could, maybe it was different if I really analysed it, only get myself so far. And I knew alone, and I knew that I could tenfold that over if I just went to people that were doing it a lot better than me.
It's mentorship at its core, right?
100%.
I think we're both big advocates of that.
100%.
You need to learn from someone
Yep.
or something, whether that be an online course, or YouTube's great for it these days. But I think an in-person mentor,
Yep.
working at an agency, learning from people who have been there, done it, and are still doing it,
Yep.
is probably one of the best ways to get involved. Now, I had a conversation with Jesus, the previous guest, about this. And we were talking about just getting started somewhere. I think a lot of people would love to get involved in an online business or build an e-commerce business or build a marketing agency. But not many people want to invest that time, whether it be a year or 2 years, working at an agency to understand how it's run. And I think that will give you a massive leg up, because you need to get insight into the industry and how it's working, to get your feet wet and learn. You know, and what better place to do it? But I've interrupted your story
that's
again.
Okay.
So.
That's all right. No, I was just going to say, it's only so much time we've got, right? And the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower and lower. You need to find a way to just get there quicker, unfortunately. I think a lot of people should probably put that pressure on themselves. You need to get there a lot quicker now, because someone is going to get ahead of you. You can have a 14-year-old that's going to get ahead of you a lot quicker, and that is a mental challenge for a lot of people. So I think, to my point of what I was saying, started or applied for a job because I knew I needed something to get me there quicker. Applied for the job. It was very interesting, actually. I thought I was turning up to an interview, and there was a lot of people in the room as well. So immediately there was that pressure of competition. And I feel like I shine quite well in that scenario, different portions of my life, but I felt like I shine quite well in that scenario. So did my first interview, just kind of spoke on my experience, what I've done, etc. Went away. I really liked the atmosphere of everybody in the office. It was very chill. Location was cool. Seemed like a good bunch. Went away and then they gave me kind of like a secondary interview. And the second interview, you had to go, and I'm trying to remember exactly what we had to do, but essentially build a plan for a business, any type of business. Build a plan to, I can't remember if it was to generate them anything specifically, but just give them exposure and build like a kind of funnel of what it would look like. So funny enough, I actually built like a trade-in community style thing, or like a training education program, and how I would bring that online, top of funnel to down. I remember being there for days. I have the book. I found it actually when I was moving, but there's a lot of pages in it, and not book, kind of sheets. I built probably about 20 pages worth, and as I'm walking in, I'm seeing people sitting there with a page, and initially in my mind I'm thinking all that time I spent, and almost in a very strange way I thought, I could have spent a lot less time on it. People have a page, they're probably going to get through it quite quick. When I showed up with the pamphlet and put it on the desk, I could immediately tell they were like, oh, okay, I'm interested to see what this guy comes across with. And as I kind of went through the first few pages, the guy that was interviewing me was like, that's enough. And in my mind, I thought, they don't like it. And it was like, you've definitely over prepared for this, but it's not a bad thing at all. Based on what you've said, I only read 2 pages. Based on what you said so far, I'm not going to tell you, but I can almost tell you that you're definitely going to fit in here, which is a relief. As much as I wanted to go through it all and show them all the value, I feel like they got it immediately in those first couple of pages. So went away. They didn't kind of say exactly if I was going to get it or not, but he kind of hinted that I was. Went away, and I was waiting for a long period of time. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but I was waiting for a long period of time, and that email came in. Got the job. It was, I think in the beginning, it was a junior account manager or a marketing assistant type of role initially. So very entry level. I do like to go into jobs where I am overqualified and I go in at the beginning. I found that actually gets you a lot higher, a lot quicker than if you go in for your immediate role. I feel like the progression path, it takes a lot longer. For whatever reason, I've had it in multiple different jobs. So I tried to go in a little bit earlier, and I went in and doing what I do best. I tried to just provide value in every way. So went in, did the initial training, etc. And I was kind of working alongside a good friend of mine. And he noticed even at that point, like, I was giving him suggestions that he didn't even think about, and he was kind of like, maybe this guy does really know his shit. So yeah, at that point, I remember being called in by the boss initially, but one thing I kept doing was there was a certain amount of things I would have to do in a day. I kept thinking, I can provide more value. I could provide more value. And I wouldn't really focus on that list. So in my mind, that call into the office was a negative. I thought, I haven't been sticking to the plan. I've been going in these different, like, maybe they don't want that. I sat down and he was just like, you're doing a very good job here, mate. And I want to just give you some accounts to manage yourself. Initially, I was just like, it sounded like a good thing, but I was also thinking of all the pressure behind it, because they really did kind of throw you in the deep end, which is definitely what I needed, but at the time I didn't know it. I struggled to think that the deep end, I was going to be able to get to the top, but I think it was a very important, crucial part of my life where I did get thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, I'd like to just stop you there, to touch on a few things, because I think that says so much about you as a person and your character, and always going above and beyond to provide as much value as possible, and also knowing that you can do better and always wanting to do better. And I think that reflects very well in you as a person, and also I see it when we're delivering to clients. There's the minimum of what we need to do, and then more often than not there's what you've done, and it always shows very well in front of the client. I think it speaks about us and our mentality as a company, really. I mean, we have that our ethos that we built, don't we? And part of that is to make every client feel as though they're our only client, and part of that is not over-servicing, because there's not a need to over-service, but it's just trying to always be the best that we can at what we're doing, and provide the client with as much value as possible to justify, the results that we're getting them, and also what they're paying us.
100%. So important.
For sure. But so you're at the point now where you've been thrown in at the deep end, you're managing a few advertising accounts. How did you feel at that time, and how did things kind of progress from there?
So it definitely initially was, it's funny, as soon as before that, you kind of stick to your 9 to 5. As soon as you get that account, you just want to be on that 24/7. You want to really, me as an individual, really want to prove myself. So I was there, before I'd start work, I'd be building out the plan for the account or what I want to do. Then I'd action it during work. And then when I finished work, where everyone's chilling or whatever the hell they would be doing, I'll just be building the next plan. I really just wanted to kind of prove, not only to them, but to myself, that I could do it. And at that point, I kind of realized that, or they realized that, okay, he's very quickly kind of built a plan for some of these clients. And I was a mixture between roles, right? Because I was overseeing some of these accounts, but I was also working alongside, Tyler is his name, working alongside Tyler on his accounts. And I kind of worked better, less on the day-to-day management, more kind of overseeing everything and having like a holistic overview of it all. So my role kind of shifted many, many times in the company. But essentially my role suited more on just trying to oversee the majority of marketing activity. So then that kind of fell into the role of, there's a mixture of roles, but I would say initially it was more of kind of like reporting everything, because the reporting was basically the translating from everything everyone's doing to the results that's happened and what we're essentially doing next. So like building the marketing plan. So essentially kind of taking that marketing operator or CMO type of role, where I was, as much as I was reporting on everything, I was really trying to build the game plan for everyone. And what it actually did is provide all of the account managers a leg up, right? Because they could focus on the day-to-day or managing their juniors and roughly thinking about strategy. I could spend all of my time thinking on strategy. Yeah.
And let's also touch on some of the accounts, because these are big 7, some even 8-figure businesses. Big US-based businesses. I know a few of them, but maybe you can touch on, the businesses, what it was like working with them, because, what we're really talking about is quite a short time period here, where you've gone from trader into a marketing agency as initially as like a junior, then moving your way up quite quickly almost into, like you've just said, more of a marketing strategist, analyst, CMO kind of role. And like I say, these aren't small accounts. These are businesses doing 7, in some instances 8 figures, so.
Well, it's definitely thrown me in the deep end, right? I think it was important to do that. The strategies between small accounts and big accounts are very different, and we can touch on that in a second. But yeah, some of the companies, I can try to label them all off the top of my head, but All 33, big one, chair company, Lowbrow Customs, big one, motorcycle company, White Knuckler, which is kind of like a custom knife and like US apparel company, Yellow Leaf Hammocks, big company. So yeah, a bunch of big companies. And what was very good from that was, or what I realized from that at that point, we had those companies that we'd work on, and then there was a bunch of other ones that were also within the business. And it was very apparent to see that the businesses that found the best success were the ones that had a very good foundation in place. They had a very good brand behind them. The people behind the brand were in the public eye, almost like as influencers as well. So they had that trust and loyal fan base. So I think it's very important, and we touch on this all the time, to have a very strong foundation in place, because again, as much as we was doing ads, and we was really doing ads at this company, there wasn't really much else we'd look into at this stage. It was so important to have that correct foundation in place. And then for the most part, a lot of what we would do would work. It was difficult for things to drastically fail. There was definitely a lot of testing. I think it was very important that I joined this company, and I didn't realize, but I'll shout out, Neil, to you, very in depth in the way we'd look into things and the way that we would test, rather than just add in, let's just say, for instance, we'd set up a campaign, add a few creatives, a few copy variations. Well, we would sit there before even thinking about building a campaign and build like the whole angles to it. So, we'd build one angle that for this chair company that was on pain, one angle that was on scarcity, and then for each one we'd have five different copy variations, creatives that were relevant to that particular topic. It showed me the levels that you can go into this with, and especially for big companies, it's important. For smaller companies, it's good to test, but you do need that, especially as an agency, you need that proof of concept a little bit earlier. So you're better off trying to almost do a little bit more of a shotgun approach with the variants that you're testing. So try to include like the pain element, the scarcity element, all of that in one copy variation, versus what we was doing, which was making it very specific. But because there was so much existing data, it was very easy to kind of go in and be like, okay, we've got a foundation here. No matter what we do, the business isn't going to fall to zero. So we can test a lot. And we had a lot of budget to do so. All 33, there was days where we spent about £15,000-20,000. Yeah. So it allowed us to test a lot. It allowed us to get the results back quick and show the value to these businesses, because it's very difficult for a big business, 7-8 figure business, to see the value sometimes in advertising. And because most companies will go in and pretty much just do the same thing, or set some goals, or just manipulate the algorithm. But I think it always comes down to, and a lot of people are now kind of seeing this, the way the algorithms are going, a lot of tracking, and there's so many reasons why, but is going out the window. And it means that we can't, targeted audiences as an example, it's a lot more difficult than it used to be. You used to be able to target absolutely anything. Even if it was a tiny little brick and mortar business in your local town, you could target them as a competitor and then run off that. Now it's very, very limited. So it's extremely important to call out your audience with the messaging and the creatives that you're using. And I think we kind of was leaning on that, but we didn't realize, because we was doing so much audience testing, we didn't realize we was kind of multiple steps ahead doing that, calling out your market with the creative and copy. Where unfortunately now people are falling into the space where, Facebook ads doesn't work anymore. Well, it's always worked and it always will work, but just the way that you use it is changing. Yeah. And I think people unfortunately get a little bit too much into the technical aspects of some of these advertising platforms. Granted, I'll tell you about every technical aspect of it and I enjoy it, but it's important to really go down to the foundational concepts of marketing.
For sure. And I think this is probably a perfect segue to now get into profit-driven marketing and how we met and formed that business. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, you touched on your journey there and how SV really was the necessary step for you and working at that marketing agency to kind of get your feet wet. And like you said, hats off to Neil, who was at that point, I guess you're one of the co-founders of the business. But anyone that I've met from that company, as in Tyler, Connor, I've not met Luke, but you've all gone on in your own rights to be very, very successful. So it sounds as though it was almost the perfect incubator for all of you to learn. And it's been interesting to meet Tyler and Connor. And when we all met together, you could see how you guys used to be such a tight-knit team, and how you all kind of bounced off each other, and all kind of similar in age as well, which is really, really nice to see. But there came a point then that me and you met each other. I think as all good British stories start, we met in a pub. And neither of us had actually met each other before. Obviously it was our first time meeting, but weren't aware of who we were. And it was actually a friend of ours who introduced us to one another, called Dan Pryor. So shout out to Dan.
Shout out Dan.
But what had happened was he reached out to me and said, do you want to catch up? Do you want to go gym and then maybe get a bit of food after? So I said, yeah, let's do it. He was one of the few people in the area that I knew of involved in the industry at that time. I was obviously doing e-com and running the ads for my high-ticket dropshipping business. At that time, you were working at a marketing agency. And then it was one of them special moments, wasn't it? When you meet someone and we ended up talking for about 3 hours straight about ads, I think, and e-com. And up until that point, being that we're both from the southeast in Kent, there's not really many people having those kinds of conversations, or that you can really sit down to and talk to about ads to that degree. And I think from that point, we exchanged numbers, and almost every day we were talking about ads and this T-ROAS, and should I run this strategy, and what do you think about this ad group and this ad set? And before you know it, we were just chatting about ads all the time, e-com, scaling businesses, and it really kind of all started from there, didn't it? And then I think you reached a certain point. Well, actually, what was happening was I was mentoring a lot of the students from Dropship Lifestyle, which I still do today. And what I found was a lot of them were really struggling with ads. So always the topic during the mentoring calls would be Google ads, social media marketing. And by that point, I felt like I'd got a pretty good understanding of the platform and was using it successfully myself for my business. And during this time, I was saying to you, Joe, like, there's so many people struggling with ads. Like, there's a lot of people building businesses, but when it comes to the ad platform, they've got a blank face. They don't really understand. And Google ads can be quite complex, 100%. Especially as a new platform. I know we whiz around it now because we use it every single day. But actually, that at some point you decided, or maybe you can talk a bit more about it, and then I'll go on to kind of how it started. But at some point, when I kept saying to you, people are struggling with ads, we should start an agency. We then ended up starting an agency together. So what was that like for you, that transition from working with clients that are maybe doing 7, 8 figures, very, very successful businesses in their own right, to then essentially building a startup agency with me, and having to then attract clients, and the caliber of clients that we were working with then was significantly the opposite end of the spectrum, wasn't it? It was people that were just getting a few £1,000s in the door a month, revenue that is, and really needed our help, not just from an advertising perspective, but to build the whole foundation of their business. And how did that affect you, going from very, very successful businesses to then, at its core, really almost, our role at that point was almost like building businesses, right?
I think it was important because what happened, I think we speak on this in many different aspects of life, it's extremely important to not become comfortable. And I found that I was becoming a little bit too comfortable at the company. And I found a lot of the stuff that we would do, again, like I said, it was very difficult to make the businesses fail like drastically because they had such a good foundation in place. A lot of the stuff we would do would work. Certain things would blow everything else out of the water, and that's kind of where we shine, which was great. But I found that similar to kind of where I started with my dad, the problems kept coming up that would make things kind of drop down quite a bit. And I really enjoyed that edge because I knew the value I was providing for, especially my dad at the beginning. I knew the value that I was providing was massive. And I didn't feel like I could get that across for some of these bigger companies. We were just kind of another number to them. Some of them were very friendly and nice with it. And when we would blow things out of the water, it'd be great. But for the most part, it was just kind of, I just wasn't getting that. I lost that fire, I think is the best way I could put it. And I needed something to be more difficult for me to really get stuck into. Like, I lost that kind of feeling where I wanted to get up early in the morning or stay up late to solve the problem. So the transition going from SV to, trying to assist some of these clients. And like where we started, you know, we just wanted to do Google ads, and we slowly started to realize like, oh, Google ads is only just one piece of the puzzle here.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really, not a funny thing to mention, but how naive we were.
Yeah.
So this must have been about 2.5 years ago, right? Back in sometime in 2021. And when I remember meeting you, we went to that shisha lounge in Canterbury, and naively we were just like, it's not about the money. We both just want to run ads. We really enjoy running ads. And then quite quickly we discovered that, oh, the business doesn't really grow if we're both just sitting in Google ads. And, you know, being that your background was somewhat managing very, very big accounts, I thought, well, let's leave Joe where he's best. Let me kind of focus on the sales, auditing, prospecting, maybe bringing the business in, because if we're both sitting in an ad account, it doesn't grow the business, you know?
I think there's a very important part of you and me and the company here, and I think it's good to touch on that. The time it's been since I started until current, when we, like, you know, 15 years old until current, when I started to look into kind of marketing, I feel like I had built so far and worked with these big companies that I actually found it very difficult to translate some of these complex things down to someone that's starting. And I think that's where you worked extremely well, or we worked extremely well together, being that I could get across some of these complex concepts to you, which you can then digest it in a simple manner for someone to understand. And that's not to say you break it down and then it's very simple the way I explain it. It's more of, you put it in a way that the person's going to understand it, depending on who the individual is. Sometimes, you know, we'd get an individual that really just doesn't understand this, where you would shine better. And then there's sometimes where an individual has been in the, you know, nuts and bolts of everything, and they truly understand it, where sometimes I can say things that are going to surprise them because I've worked on businesses bigger than theirs. So I think it's extremely important to have that, but we kind of nurture each other in either end of the spectrum. I will explain complex things and try to now make them simple, because you've kind of taught me that, and then you'll now be able to do it vice versa, be able to show me, well, a kind of better way to explain that would be, I can explain something simple, you can complex, you can explain it to me in a simple manner, and then it's kind of slowly hardwiring my brain to think of everything in a more simplistic view. It's extremely important. And I think even now, some of the bigger companies, it's a lot easier to just pack it, you know, punch with a smaller amount of words.
For sure. It's I think we just played into each other's strengths and weaknesses, didn't we? And the amount that we've grown as individuals from that point is probably laughable. The transition, you know, really. I think about us when we first started. I think we're very quick to learn and understand and highlight each other's strengths or weaknesses on what we both need to improve on, which has helped us grow significantly. There's no egos here. You know, we often say if either of us were egotistical, we'd probably hate each other. I mean, I think the amount of times I say things to you and I'm thinking, probably not sure how he's going to take this, but I need to say it, because I think that's also something that's really important, especially if you are going into business with someone, is you just got to tell them how it is. 100%. It's the only way. You're not going to help each other by prettying up what you're trying to say. Just got to come out and say it.
Definitely.
But yeah, playing on each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I think it's a really important thing to do, is to identify where each of you sit best in the company. And I think it's something that we focus on even more now than ever, which is truly identifying each of our team members' roles and responsibilities, so that everyone knows exactly what they're responsible for and who they're responsible for, and just clearly defining those roles. If you've got a business where, you know, there are two founders, like in our situation, and there's so much overlap in what both of you are doing, I think it just overcomplicates things. Just be like, you stick to the accounts, I'll stick to sales. Obviously there's more to what we do than just that, but just to really dial it down. And then everyone knows what they're doing and what's supposed to be done. You know what you need to be working on. I think that's very, very important. It's what we've found even more so now when we're hiring staff, is you need to, in black and white, tell them, you know, this is what you're responsible for at its core. And these are the things that I'd like you to do. Once you know what they're doing and they know what they're supposed to be doing, it makes the whole operation run a lot smoother. But we kind of talked about your journey. We talked about how we met. Now I think it'd be good to kind of talk on our business and how it grew. So I remember yesterday when we were both sitting down, we were thinking, oh, you know, there's probably some really interesting things we can share. I don't know if you were able to kind of come up with anything. I was thinking on it this morning a little bit. but maybe I'll just start with, those first few clients we had. And obviously, like you said, that transition from you for going from working with 7 to 8 figure businesses down to people that are barely turning over a revenue.
Yep.
At the start, we almost had to pitch to these businesses in a way that we knew that their foundation needed so much work. It wasn't as simple as just running ads. And I think this is something that we often explain to people. We're very real with them and say that ads aren't magic. Like, at its core, yes, we're very good at what we do. We can create a very good hook. We can create a good creative. We can create good copy. We can split test. We can find out what's working. We can find you a good audience. But in its simplest form, paid advertising is really just showing an ad to a particular audience in the hope that they're then going to convert, whether that be on Google and you're doing it based on search terms, which in most instances will have a bit more intent behind it, or whether you're doing social media marketing, which are interruption-based channels. But at its core, you need to have, if it's e-com or if it's a service-based business, you need to have a good business. You need to have a good product. At its very core is, I think we often find if a business is already doing well organically, or they're already operating to a degree from paid ads, it's then very easy for us to come in and see the opportunity because they've done the hard work for us.
100%.
They've built it from the ground up and they've got at its core a good foundation. If you try and scale a business that has no foundation, or you try and run a paid ads at the first, all you're really doing is paying for data to get them back data, but the business owner then needs to take that data and act on it and improve their business as quick as possible. Whereas what you're doing with organic, it's a slow burner, but if you can get proof of concept organically and then add paid ads, it's just like adding fuel to the fire.
100%.
You put that business under a magnifying glass. But where I'm going with this is the businesses at the start, they needed so much assistance. And maybe that's not necessarily a fault of ours, but it was our first time prospecting. It was our first time getting clients on. I think we're much better now identifying which businesses that we can truly help, not through any fault of our own that we couldn't necessarily help those businesses at the start, but in some instances they couldn't really help themselves. There was so much work that needed to be done. They didn't have any basic setup like abandoned cart flows, welcome flows. They were barely converting organically. There was no real on-site conversion rate optimization. Everything was very basic. They were being outpriced by their competitors. So many different variables that come into play. I think we're very quick to identify these things now and know where you need to patch up. But by simply running paid ads for these businesses, it wasn't enough to get them off the ground, was it?
No, it wasn't. And I think it was actually the best thing we could have done was finding these businesses, because what it now allows us to do is we know the things you need to look out for, right? We know the problems that these businesses had and the reason why the ads wouldn't work. So now we know to look out for those problems when we're prospecting businesses, because as much as some businesses have a certain amount of revenue, you don't know whether there's loads of things that are actually stopping that business from going up, and it's not just anything. It's not just to do with ads, right? And I think to speak on our name, profit-driven marketing, being that you had the business prior, a dropshipping business, the businesses that we started off with were dropshipping businesses, and they had very tight margins. So the formation of our name actually almost came off the basis that we knew, and I even knew when I was in SV, that businesses don't care, depending on the size, that much, especially if you're smaller. Revenue doesn't matter that much. Profit matters, because you need to pay for our fee, you need to pay for the ad spend, you need to pay tax, or VAT. It's very difficult to start when you're just operating off revenue unless you have capital, especially in the dropshipping space.
Yeah, you can't operate just off revenue because revenue sometimes is a bit of a vanity metric, 100%. Isn't it? Because at the end of the day, what is important is the profit that you're turning over. I mean, I guess in some instances, certain businesses want to just scale revenue, and maybe they're getting investment from elsewhere and they need to show proof of concept, and breaking even is enough. I do understand that. But truly, if you're building a business, normally it's to make money. Yes, maybe you're passionate about the product, and maybe there are other reasons. If you're already very successful, maybe you really are just passionate about it and you don't care about the money. But I think for 90% of people, or more than that, at its core, you need to see the numbers. You need to see that the business is turning over a profit. very, very important. And like you say, I think that is what sparked our name, wasn't it? I remember back and forth.
Yeah.
I think we were reading the book called Fanatical Prospecting at the time, weren't we? And we were like, fanatical marketing? We were like, no.
Who's going with anything?
Yeah, and then we got profit-driven marketing. I think it's very direct. The name explains itself.
Yep.
But it's also a testament to the way in which we operate. We help people calculate true profit, which I think is very, very important, rather than just using revenue. Because at the end of the day, yes, revenue's great, but guys, I'm working on this % margin. Like I've got my cost of goods, I've got your fees. All of a sudden, that revenue doesn't matter because the profit's actually right down here.
Exactly like you said. Unfortunately, it's a vanity metric, and I think, especially with these smaller businesses, initially when they get a little bit of revenue, they, for whatever reason, sometimes forget about the profit. I think it's because they're dreading it almost a little bit. But I think it's extremely important because it actually gives you a pulse. Without even knowing how the prospect feels, you'll know how they feel through seeing their profit. So I think it's extremely important, especially for these smaller businesses, to track it and work out where are the avenues you can go to generate more profit. Because again, in the dropshipping space, right, you could have an item that has a 10% margin that's worth £1,000, and then you could have an item that's worth £100 and has a 60% margin. You know, you're not really too far off, and you're probably better off just scaling that £100 product. So I think it's extremely important because, again, like I say, you could have £1,000 items, you could sell 20, 30, 40 of those a month and generate a fair amount, but you're only operating on a 10, 20% margin.
Yeah, I think margin is so important when it comes to scalability. It's something we've both identified. I'm not sure if you agree. I would say in some instances, obviously it really depends on the niche and the product, but especially when it comes to meta, I think that sweet spot is almost like in the £100 to £150 range. And if the bigger the margin, the better. But if you're clearing a 70% margin, you're good. You can scale that business very, very well. But when you're talking to businesses that are like, you know, my average order value is £25. I'm operating on a 30% margin, and you do the maths and you're like, you're just not even going to get a CPA that low, not on meta. And now, you know, we're just very real with businesses like that. We're like, I don't think that paid ads right now is going to be the best thing for your business, just because your margins are so tight. Advertising's only getting more expensive, right? You know, your CPMs are going up, the cost of advertising due to the level of competition and the amount of people that have businesses now. You know, it doesn't always mean that you need paid ads to scale. It also needs to be the right margin and the right product. Like we always say, ads aren't magic, you know? You need to be looking at the back end, how much you're going to make. And these are all questions that we'll ask in a discovery call, and people will go, oh, I spoke to another agency and they said, yeah, they'll be able to do this easily and take me to X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, be very, very careful of people promising you that. Look at the numbers. Like I can tell you now, it's very unlikely if you're selling a product that's £25 on a 30% margin. What would that even be? I can't do the maths. It's like, I don't know, a £10 profit margin. Who's going to get a £10 CPA? And even then, if you're getting a £10 CPA, that would be to break even. You know, your cost per acquisition is so important. So I think you've got to look at the numbers, and it's something that a lot of people don't do. I mean, we have access to most of our clients' QuickBooks, their accounts, you know, Shopify, truly actually looking at total revenue, because a lot of the time we might be driving traffic through Google Ads or social media marketing. Not everything gets attributed back to the advertising account. Some clients are doing lead generation in which they're closing deals off the back of it. So we truly need to get an understanding of what they're spending with us, if we're, in most instances, their primary source of traffic, and then what's actually happening on the back end. I don't know many agencies out there in the advertising space that are requesting to look at clients' QuickBooks, to analysing the numbers, telling them true profit. And I think that's really where we distinguish ourselves in one sense. I think there's many other ways as well, but is actually looking at the numbers.
I think it's so important. You know, as much as everything you're saying really is important, but I think you need to find ways that you can stand out in the market, right? There's 1,000,000,001 agencies. You need to stand out in some way. I think a lot of it actually comes down to our personality type, not so much just the service we provide, but who we are as individuals and how we put ourselves across. But yeah, 100%. If you can, you know, I think a lot of people are afraid to ask for some of these things, but a lot of businesses have never been asked that question, and they almost think, damn, you're actually really investing your time into me here. We're not just another number to you guys. I think it's very important the way that we've tried to build this agency is to have those long-term partnerships and not just be a churn and burn. You know, bring a bunch of clients in, drop them off, bring a bunch of clients in, drop them off. I think it's extremely important to build that. And I think us as individuals as well, we like to have those long-term invested relationships.
We're people at its core,
Yep.
isn't it? Like you're going to want, like, what would you prefer in life? Would you prefer to have a group of friends that you've known for a very long time, or would you like to be introduced to a new person every couple of months and keep changing people? Like, I'm not saying it's like that, but if you think of it at its core with clients, if you're just churning and burning clients, you don't even get a chance to truly understand their business. It takes time to truly understand the intricacies of their business.
100%.
You can look at previous performance data and look at numbers, but that's why we often will have a marketing meeting and ask the client very selective questions to truly understand more about their business, the way in which it's operating. You know, yes, you can see a lot from looking at previous performance and numbers and data, but more often than not, the customer or the client can tell you based on their gut or give you insights into their business that you wouldn't otherwise know looking at the numbers. And I think that's also extremely important is, you know, often when we'll take on a business that's worked with an agency in the past, you know, they'll go, oh, they didn't look into my cost of goods. They didn't tell me what my profit margins were. They didn't even take that into consideration. They didn't jump on a call with me. They didn't ask for my insights. I just got a report at the end of the month that said, yeah, you've got 400% ROAS.
Yep.
What does that even mean?
Nothing.
What does a ROAS even mean if you don't understand what the COGS cost or the profit margins are, or even taking the time to understand their business? You might be able to double that, or might be able to scale that, or maybe that's not even profitable for them, you know?
100%.
But more often than not, unless it's a big business already, some clients don't know how to look at their COGS and calculate their profit margins and do these things. I mean, they should. Yeah. And I think you know this from what I'm like with our business when I'm running through the expenses and, you know, going through everything with a fine comb. But it's very, very important. It's something I overlooked in my e-commerce business, you know, and it's very easy for you to just look at that bank balance and not consider your corporation tax, your VAT. And it's, again, easy to get carried away. And then when that bill comes out and you see what's left, you're like, oh, damn, you know? So we're very, very careful with that in our business as well, but also our clients,
Definitely.
You know?
I think that was my transition again. Like, if I was to talk from going from a bigger company working with these bigger businesses, we'd never look into any of that. In that particular scenario, I guess it didn't matter as much, but maybe if we did, it would have been a completely different business and there would have been way more value for it. So I think it was important. I think you kind of showed me that being with your ecom business. Like, there's a lot kind of going on here. Like, Joe, I can't just have this ROAS. Like, I need the ROAS to be double that. And then you would explain why. And then I was like, okay, so it's not just really down to whatever is in this ad account. And that's where I actually started to learn it. So I think you kind of sparked that for us in that scenario based on the experiences that you were having. And then the clients we got on were having a similar experience on a smaller scale to what was happening with yours, where we would have to calculate a lot more than just whatever the ROAS is in it. Because, you know, I feel like there's been, over time, ROAS numbers just chucked out into thin air and people just think, oh, a 2x or a 3x is a good ROAS, but it's all relative to actually what profit that you're making, depending like lifetime value. There's so many different variables to it, but I think it's extremely important. And another point I wanted to touch on, which you kind of said there, the reason why we do it is, and why we kind of stick by, is just honesty and transparency. I think you need to be extremely honest, be transparent, and to add to that, care. Like, if you care for some of these businesses, a lot of the time things won't go exactly to plan and you'll have to pivot and make changes, but that's the whole point of testing. But I think if at its core you're very honest and you show that you care for these businesses, they will stick along the ride for you. Like, business is a roller coaster. It's not always just a linear path up, unfortunately. But when you invest in individuals and then for that invest in their business, they will stand by you.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something you said earlier about, us and the way in which we operate. And I think it's really important to touch on that. And it's something that we always abide by, isn't it? Being honest and being transparent. You know, something I think I always say, and I think you've started saying it now as well, is the numbers don't lie.
Yep.
We're going to show you, what you're spending, what campaigns or what ad groups are actually generating results, show you the results of the tests that we're doing, because we're on a journey with that business. I don't think you can get that across in just an end of month report like a lot of agencies think you can. Maybe they do just fine with those, but we've tried to make it a bit more intimate. And truly relay to them what we're seeing, what we're doing and why, and allow the client to also give their perspective and their ideas. Doesn't mean we always run with them, but we take them into consideration. At the end of the day, it's worked very well for us. But I think it also comes down to us as people, and we put it into our ethos and we explain it when we're onboarding team members, you know, honesty, transparency, we tackle things together here. We're really trying to move as a unit and build a team that also has the values that we want to instill into them. But what you're saying about investing into people as well, I think what we're starting to see, not even just in our industry, but online as a whole, is that there's been quite a shift now in people trying to sell based on them being a business versus trying to sell as a personal brand. And it's something that we've started looking into as well. You see it, these successful guys who scale their personal brands, build an audience, and can practically sell anything because people buy into people. And if you portray yourself in a certain way, and the way we try to do it is just be genuine, show our true selves, you know, remove all the BS, because there's so much of that on social media, and there's so much lies and manipulation, and everyone's trying to sell someone something. I think the approach we take is we just truly try to present our true self. And if we align with people, in most instances we do, because we are genuine, it's less of a sell. Really, people are investing in you. And like you say, if you're honest and you're transparent and you're good at what you do, and we show them everything that we're going to do, how it's going to impact their business, what could happen, what might not work so well, and as long as they're happy to do that, then, you know, we begin testing, we show them what's working, and that's truly the way to scale, I think.
100%. Do you know what it actually does, what it boils down to? It just gives everyone peace of mind. Gives the client peace of mind, gives you peace of mind. I think I've learned this from my dad, actually, because I used to be quite bad for it when I was young. I think it's one of those where it's instilled so much that you kind of want to go against it. But I found as I grew up, it's so important, and you just have this horrible weight on your shoulders when you're just not honest. I struggle to understand how people can go their whole lives and kind of like manipulate everyone and lie about everything. I think with our company and just anything, the way if we are honest and transparent, it gives us peace of mind. And then it gives the client peace of mind. And then they truly do invest in you. So no matter really what, like I said, no matter really what is happening, and this is not to say, you know, drastic things happen, but there is ups and downs. They invest in you. They know you're going to be honest. There's many, many times even where we've been honest, where we've taken a business on, and again, the foundation isn't correct, but we want to do what we can to try to help. And we'll be honest with the client and say, look, unfortunately, there's quite a lot of things that need to be solved here. I think realistically, you should not. We actually tell people not to invest money. Like, as much as it would be easy for us to do, and this is what a lot of agencies do, don't invest your money here right now. Focus on these elements that are going to make sure you have the right foundation in your business, and then we can elevate what you're doing. And again, that boils down to us being honest and transparent, and how much peace of mind it gives you and the client. They just think, wow, I actually really appreciate these guys. And sometimes they'll even just stick along the journey because you have given them that feedback. Super important.
Yeah, I think we normally almost undersell and really set like a realistic expectation, normally one that we know we're going to blow straight past. But, you know, there's always uncertainties with business, and we'll always say we cannot guarantee anything. You know, we're confident in our ability, and this is the proposal that we've put together, and this is the strategy that we're going to implement based on what you've told us about your business during the discovery call and what we've uncovered during our audit. But yes, we can be confident that this is going to work, but there are always uncertainties in business. In 2 weeks' time, their best-selling product may run out of stock, something they didn't tell you on the discovery call, at which point, you know, revenue drops, and then, you know, they're looking at you going, but you told me you're going to get my revenue to 100K. And it's like, you know, you got to take, like we always say, you just got to be so fluid in business. But to touch on what you've said there about being honest and transparent, I do not like dishonest people. I don't like liars. I don't like people who are dishonest, especially when you know they're being dishonest and they continue to do so. I mean, we've even had it with some clients. I won't even get into any particular situations, but you already know, you know, who I'll be talking about. You know, especially if they're part of a board and the whole board's on a call with us, they'll lie through their teeth. And end up making us look bad as an agency because they're not being honest about, you know, things that we've been telling them 4 weeks ago, and they haven't actioned on their part, and they'll try and reflect it back on us. That's the other thing that you have to be quite careful of as an agency, is as much as we try to be an integral part of their team, you are external.
Yep.
And if there's a lot of decision makers there and a lot of people who should be taking action outside of our agency but within the business, unless they're honest individuals and will put their hands up, what do they say? Like it ends up being us. You're the only external solution there. And when things get bad, it will be the finger pointing. And even if we've done absolutely everything on our end and kept them updated and given them everything, quite often it can be, us that then gets the finger pointed at with certain businesses.
Yes.
So you also have to be very careful from that perspective. It's not just a business with a good foundation. At its core, who are the business owners? Who are the people that you're going to be working with? And sometimes you don't uncover that until you start working with them, unfortunately. Or you see personalities start to change quite quickly. And people have been deceitful and they've not shown their true self, and now they're showing their true colours, But dishonesty and lies, it's things that we just don't stand for. Not even just in business, but in life.
Yeah. But that's what it all boils down to. I think, as much as we're speaking on business now, where this all started is, and hopefully people see it, the way that we operate as individuals then translate over to business. Like, majority of the time, a business problem isn't a business problem, it's a personal problem.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah. We've seen so many businesses by this point where actually I don't think it's the business that's an issue, it's the actual owner.
Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy. It is crazy. You're so right with that.
I think it's important. I think it's so important, even from our perspective now and again. We've been in business a couple of years now and we learn something new all the time, every day, it feels. But I think from our perspective now, it's not just about, this ad account looks really good, we probably can do something well here. It's like, okay, how's the individual? Like, how are they? Are they calculated? Do they know what's going on? Are they just like some marketing manager in the company that's joined, a couple of months ago? They barely even really understand the business and the nuts and bolts. They just want to get a guarantee behind them and get you to run the ad so they don't have to worry about it anymore. Those are the people you really need to kind of identify as early as possible. And again, yes, we've unfortunately onboarded, but this is all part of the learning phase, right? You have to learn about business and then you have to learn about people. And I think really we learn about people throughout our whole lives, but when you go into business, it really does get put under a magnifying glass.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing with being a service-based business, right? At its core, yes, you're dealing with businesses, but also people.
Yep.
And you need to really get on with those people as individuals. I wanted to touch on maybe some of the clients now that we're serving now, not by name, but the types of businesses that we're working with and how we came by those businesses. And I think it's also important to share the journey because when we first started our agency, like I said earlier, naively, we just, we weren't doing any lead generation. We weren't doing anything to get clients in, and we just kind of thought the clients would find us, which, as stupid as it sounds, we just wanted to be in there in the ad account doing the ads. And I think, in my opinion, the pivotal point for us was when we ended up buying Charlie Morgan's course and doing sort of the cold loom outreach, something that we still do now. And that was where we started booking those first discovery calls, getting businesses on that were actually doing half decent revenue. And some of them that we onboarded back in April, May of last year, so almost a year ago now, in that we're approaching March, were some of our biggest clients to date, or they were at the time, through simple cold outreach, and you wouldn't have thought by sending an email, you could get on with businesses doing over 100K a month, but you can. And I think that was really a pivotal point for us. We started going from those people who didn't really have a good foundation, didn't really have a scalable business at its core, unfortunately, to then people doing 100K plus a month that we could really actually get into. And I think it's also worth sharing not only how we initially got them clients on, but our approach and how we were able to close those businesses. And I wanted to touch on our process and what we do. So, initially, like all things, we start with a discovery call to truly understand and ask the right questions and learn about the business, learn about, basically identify whether or not they've got a good foundation. If we feel as though they're a good fit and they have a good foundation and we believe we can truly scale that business, then we offer them an audit, don't we? Go away, we get access to their advertising accounts, audit their business, all of their advertising accounts. When I say all, maybe Google ads, social media marketing, TikTok, any channels that they might be on. And We do a very, very in-depth analysis, like probably in some instances overkill. Like you went into your meeting for your job interview with 20 pages. That's how we'll sit down with an audit.
Yeah.
You know, we really get the whole team involved. We look truly at the intricacies. We look at 2 years worth of previous data, analyze top performing products, top performing brands, what's working well, what isn't, to the point where we're looking at bidding strategies, campaign types, how they've got their products segmented. We provide so much value for free up front for 2 reasons. One, because it allows us to identify and truly understand the business prior to onboarding. But secondly, because it plays into the payment model that we operate on. We need to truly make sure that these businesses are scalable, because when we onboard someone, we offer them a guarantee and obviously work solely on performance. So what we often say is, we guarantee that we'll outperform your existing ad performance or you don't pay us, which means if they're currently achieving 100K a month at a 5x ROAS, what we're saying is we're not going to dip below that ROAS and we're going to increase your revenue. Which shows that we're not afraid to put skin in the game. But then also what's interesting is the way in which we bill people. It's different to a typical agency that will come in and set a fixed monthly retainer. What we do is invoice them for the additional revenue generated by our services on top of their existing results from paid advertising. So if we see over the last 6 months they've achieved 100K a month, we'll look at that and we'll strategize and create essentially a personalized proposed strategy about how we're going to take them from 100K to 150 or 200K, and only take a percentage of revenue share from that additional growth past 100K. I don't know any other agencies doing that.
No.
You know? And that is our process. And I think that's also what's allowed us to scale, and hopefully speaks to us as people and who we are. I mean, how many agencies out there are going to go, just on board 5K a month. They'll do a 6 or 12 month contract. We don't even do a monthly rolling contract, right? So we've removed all of the risk from the business owner. We're guaranteeing that we'll improve their performance or they don't pay. We're saying that they only pay us a percentage of the additional revenue that we generate as a result of our services. Monthly rolling contracts, so they can leave any time. There's no risk. We're putting skin in the game.
Even prior to taking the business on, we're doing that, right? We're presenting them an audit, a very in-depth audit. It's showing investment in their business, right? And I think then it's very important, again, like we say, within that discovery call, that initial interaction, do we believe in this person as well? Do we think by presenting the audit to this individual that it's going to come across in the right way or not? And I think at that point, we know then, okay, right, especially because we've got a team, we can confidently say, and I think it's very important when you get the team, like when it's just me and you, it's like, maybe we can go ahead and do it. It's like not too much time investment. It's only really me and you. But as soon as you get the team, you really need to think about them as well. It's like, do I want to put my team through audit in this business? Because we really need to have a high percentage chance that this is going to close. Who's the individual behind it? Are they just looking for freebies? Again, we're offering something free that's extremely valuable. These businesses could take it and go and replicate it themselves if they wanted to. 9 times out of 10, the business either sees the value in what we're doing and can see how far it's going to go. They don't have the time themselves. There's many different reasons why. It's very uncommon that a business will take it and go and implement. I don't think we've ever actually seen that happen. But I think it's important to give that upfront investment.
Yeah, we've had people that have tried to do that and failed, haven't we? We've gone through the lengths of completing an audit, providing someone with a proposed strategy, running through on call, which takes us about 90 minutes generally to actually reload the strategy and the proposal, explain to them what they could essentially expect by onboarding with us. One individual comes to mind who, we'd quoted them, we were going to work on performance, and he didn't quite like that idea. We called him a few days later and asked if what his thoughts were, whether he wanted to proceed. And he said, I've found someone on Upwork who's going to do it for $200 a month. And I remember not even being able to hold back my laugh. Yeah. I just sort of laughed on the phone, not in a horrible way, but I just honestly said, honestly, good luck to you. I really hope it works out. He's like, I showed them the strategy and they've said they can build all the campaigns for me and manage it for $200 a month. I was like, you get what you pay for. 100%. It's not just the building of the strategy. What you're paying for is our ongoing expertise. We're a team of 6 now. Data analysts, strategists, account managers, mine and your knowledge. constantly analysing, coming down on marketing meetings like this and discussing the next steps for these particular clients and how to solve their problems, there's no one on Upwork who's going to charge $200 a month that you're going to get that quality of service for. And then what happened? He reached out 2-3 months later, exactly as we knew he would.
Yep.
Yeah, it didn't end up working too well with the freelancer I was working with.
We charge in proportion to both the value that we provide and the problem that we solve, right? If you want to go take a complex problem, it depends who the business is, but take a complex problem and go find someone on Upwork and get it for a fraction of the real value, the real cost of the value that it's providing, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get what you want. Unless you are a type of individual that really kind of understands it and can monitor the person. But a lot of the time, that's not what people are going on there for. They're looking for cheap labor for the most part, which again, in some scenarios isn't bad. If it's a simple problem that you can explain the process, and we speak on this, we'd rather create some guidelines, depends on the individual, but guidelines and SOPs, etc., to give structure to individuals. So it's very difficult for them to kind of go outside of that and go down the wrong path. I think both for our internal teams and the people that we work, we even provide SOPs to some of our clients of how they should operate internally to make it easier for themselves. Talking on like the lead generation side of things, right? We generate leads, but for the most part, some of these businesses also need help on their back-end processes and to understand how they should operate their sales team and where these leads should go and the qualification phases, or maybe you should have, when this lead comes through, just try to pick up the phone quickly. A lot of businesses will, let's just say, for instance, someone's emailed in, they might leave that email for a couple of days. Like, you need to really be on top of yourself and your team.
Yeah, I think in a world where we're filled with so many distractions now, you need to catch leads and catch people in the moment.
Yep.
If someone's opting in for something, really you need that quick turnaround.
100%.
I think, not that I blame Amazon for this, but with their speedy delivery, they've made everyone impatient. People now getting constant endorphins when scrolling their phone. It is endorphin, isn't it? Yeah. So like TikTok, you're not doing anything and you're getting that rush of energy. It's too easy. It's literally at people's fingertips. Yeah. So now it's becoming harder and harder to captivate attention, and that was something I wanted to touch on earlier when you said in the mornings and in the evenings are the only is the time where your mind is running. Why? Because there's no distractions. That just goes to show how distracted we are in everyday life, that you can't even find a moment to sit down and stop and think. That's why it will come to you at night when you're laying in bed trying to actually sleep. Your mind's like, but you haven't solved all these problems yet, And I think that just goes to show how much noise there is everywhere. I don't want to digress too much on that point, because what I really want to touch on is, some of the problems that we have been solving for businesses. You started touching on tracking and attribution, or actually I think we mentioned it earlier, sorry, but you just mentioned lead generation, which is an area where we've seen a massive lack of tracking and attribution, especially with some of the businesses that we've audited and continue to work with today. I'll give an example and then maybe you can expand, but we audited businesses that had spent £10,000 on average on Google Ads per month over what sort of time period? 5-10 years? Very, very long time, with next to nothing being attributed in the advertising account. And what they were doing was they were at its core an e-commerce business, but they make bespoke products for very, very big clients. Amazon, Microsoft, airports, the government. So really, really big projects. They were running lead generation campaigns, and some products they were doing direct to sale on Google. The direct to sale, they were getting some of that attributed back to the advertising account, but 90% of the spend had no conversions attributed to it whatsoever in the Google advertising account. And their process was, more often than not, it would be a form submission or a phone call. But past that point, it wasn't really being tracked anywhere. Was it being tracked in sheets briefly?
Yeah, well, it was not really. It was all kind of just being, it was putting their finger in the air a little bit with it. A phone call would come in and they would make a note on a sheet of paper. They would forget to follow up with that person. It was a very messy process.
And this is a very successful business in its own right. I think they have 16 employees. Probably the team's probably grown even more. We went to visit them, didn't we? Which was great to meet them in person. Brilliant guy, Dan. But anyway, they had a massive issue. And maybe you can talk on how we actually got round solving that issue, and how we've now basically completed complete transparency between Google Ads, their CRM, by using software to pass information between the two.
I think it's very important, again, when we invest in these companies, to try to really understand the problems that they're facing and not just give them a one glove fits all service. We could have easily just focused on a very small portion of their business, which most agency probably would have. But we knew that we needed to provide a service here which would show him, especially these people, a lot of the businesses that we work with actually have been in the advertising accounts before. So we really need to know our stuff, because they're going to spot it quickly, which again puts us under a magnifying glass. And for the most part of those individuals, we've always shown quite well. So what we essentially did was, initially what was happening was they had Google Ads, they would have kind of their CRM, which was slowly being developed in the background, where they kept all of their contacts, their existing customers, and then they would have like QuickBooks, whatever their accounting software was, right? And Shopify. So there was Shopify, Google Ads, QuickBooks, CRM, and all of these things were completely disconnected. So the account was really operating below a 2x ROAS for like 10 years. So
in the Google advertising
Ads account.
Obviously, when we looked at QuickBooks and started correlating all of the data to see what was being spent, what was actually being generated, it wasn't quite that bleak. They were actually generating a lot of money, but that spend wasn't being attributed to, the conversions weren't being attributed to the campaigns. So that ad spend, when we came in and finally introduced that software to be able to create that loop, and we could see truly what campaigns were converting with regards to form submissions and call tracking, identified immediately a lot of wasted spend, didn't it?
100%. So what we did was essentially try to, there's a lot of different softwares to do it. I don't need to go into specific names of software, but essentially we needed some sort of form of call tracking and form tracking software, which would keep a tab of everything that was happening through the website, which wasn't being tracked. So, people would go over the phone, being some of the items were worth 15, 20, 25, 50,000. Like some of these orders were massive for these company, bespoke orders or large quantities for businesses. So it's kind of more like a B2B strategy rather than D2C strategy. But what that then allowed us to do was to put it in its simplest form. When someone would go through Google Ads, we'd be able to have their click ID. They would either go on the phone or they'll do a form submission. So then we've tracked that individual with their click ID. As soon as the person has jumped off the phone or the form has gone through, that would then move over to the CRM. And now that contact wouldn't only just be a contact now, it would have the click ID. So now it's always being associated to that initial touch point on Google Ads. And then what would happen over time, which doesn't always happen immediately, right? It would track the activity of that individual, and then over time a quote would go out, and then that value then passes back to Google Ads initially to show like, look, this business might not have closed yet, but this is where we're getting quotes, which I think is extremely important, because you need to try to provide Google data as quickly as possible so it can optimize. I think some people think, again, when it comes to this, it's great. A lot of people do offer this service, but I think it's very important to pass back inklings of data that kind of showcase that this is the type of individual we want to look for. It might have not closed yet, but these are the type. This is the audience. So that's where you start. You pass a little bit of data back to Google, which then could find more individuals that could be looking for a quote. And then over time, that revenue data then gets associated, passed back to the Google Ads account. So then what that has allowed for is we can track the D2C or B2C sales. We can then track over time businesses, or it doesn't even need to be a business, it's about being closed, but a high ticket sale, or even a low ticket sale, but it's been done over the phone, or a form submission, which you would never really track directly from Google Ads. And then it just provides that full loop. So they now know when they invest money here, they're generating these D2C sales. It just gives you the source of truth, and then you can add fuel to the fire. But if you don't know where the fire is, you're just throwing fuel in the air and have no idea where it's going.
That's it. Without seeing what business is being generated as a result of your paid advertising campaigns, one, you're not giving Google what it needs to actually, feed the algorithm, for use of better words. It can't see what campaigns are generating leads. It doesn't know what leads are quality either, because generating a lead and generating a high quality lead are two very different things. If we can pass revenue data back to Google, which is the solution that we provide for a lot of businesses, then you can start to optimize based on revenue at a campaign level, an ad group level, or even a search term level, which is very, very powerful. The other thing that a lot of these businesses aren't doing is they're not using customer lists and first-party data, which Google is now relying more and more on as audience signals and segments and things like that as well. So I think that's just one scenario of how we kind of solve that problem. And now the process is, lead generated, information passed through to the CRM, quoted by the sales team, deal closed, revenue data passed back to Google, and now we can optimize the Google campaigns based on revenue and lead generation, whereas prior it was £10,000 a month being spent with no, like you said, would you say truth of source? No real understanding of which campaigns are generating that other than a gut feel. And the business owner in his own right did a very, very good job, because a lot of those times those gut feels were correct, but there were also a lot of opportunities that we identified of wasted ad spend and areas where actually if you'd have pushed more ad spend here, we can scale and start to better project. I think that's the most important thing, is using the numbers to project and actually grow the business.
That is the most important thing. Growth. That's what we do, because a lot of these businesses will maintain with their current structure. Like, as much as, like I said, it was all 1x ROAS in the ad account, when you look at the business overall, it was a lot better than that. But what they couldn't do was grab their budget and put more into Google ads, because there's no confidence behind it. It would just be a shot in the dark. So what it actually does is it provides the source of truth to businesses, but it gives them almost like the insurance that, or reinsurance that if they invest more, they're going to generate more. Whereas prior to that, they wouldn't. Most businesses will invest money into something if they know they're going to be able to get a return from it. And unfortunately, in this scenario and many scenarios that we found, they don't have that source of truth, which then makes it very difficult for them to commit. But again, with our honest and transparency, we won't tell the business to, oh no, just keep investing. Like, if it's working on the back end, just keep investing. No, we want to give you this source of truth so you can see it. We can all see it. And at that point, it's like, okay, now you can go ahead and invest this money because we're confident. And I think this actually loops back to some points you made in the very beginning about being confident in your own ability, which then the client really sees it. A lot of people, especially the businesses, and I actually like the businesses that we work with, because a lot of our businesses we work with truly understand the intricacies of what we do, which is a good thing, because then it shows to us that what we do is actually really good. It's not just, we've learned some Facebook ads or Google ads on YouTube and then gone ahead and just try to replicate it.
That's what I mean. Going back to what Mo Gaudat says about not associating certain words with yourself. If we were to just introduce ourselves and say we just do paid ads, that would be underselling what we do massively. I mean, this tracking and attribution problem, we've used this to solve issues for multiple seven-figure businesses by this point. And if there are seven-figure businesses that are operating in that way, and like what we've just explained, this is the truth to them being able to scale further. What does that mean? That's the opportunity to take that seven-figure business and really, really grow it. But we've spoken quite a bit now on lead generation, and that's one particular area that we tend to specialize in. But let's not forget e-com as well. Most of our clients are actually e-commerce based, and we've got some particular clients that we've taken from, points where they were doing £1,000 to £2,000 a month in revenue. Now they're achieving months where they're achieving £200,000 plus in monthly recurring revenue. That in itself is a testament to, I guess, what we do and the way in which we operate. But what do you think are some of the problems that a lot of e-commerce businesses face that we tend to solve, or what we maybe do differently? We obviously touched on the cost of goods and how we work based on profit metrics rather than just revenue and ROAS. But what else do you think we do that's a little bit different?
I think we can translate, especially if the business has good foundation in place, we can translate their message correctly into the marketing. I think a lot of businesses, unfortunately, have this thing where they have all of these brilliant ideas, but they don't understand how to put that into a strategy. And I think we do extremely well in understanding the problems or the things that their product potentially solves or the market they want to reach. And then we can reverse engineer that and translate that into marketing or paid ads. So I think if I was to say any particular problems, I would say it's sometimes businesses have too much going on. So we can pick the best bits of it and then translate that into our ads and then do it that way. I think a lot of businesses have, and I can think of a couple here, conflicting interests, where sometimes we can sit in the middle and be like, right guys, this is good, this is good. Almost like a little bit of like a counselor in that sense, which I think people actually really appreciate. That's one thing that I've not thought on too much, but I think business owners really appreciate our word and, again, our honesty, where some founders, and I don't think we really run into this, but founders where they have an idea, this guy has an idea, or this guy has an idea, and they can't really meet in the middle. We kind of provide that middle part and be like, that sounds good for this reason, that sounds good for this reason, and then we can bring it all together.
I think it comes back to what we're saying about just being real, being genuine, being honest and being truthful. If someone has a good idea, we'll explain to them, yeah, I think that's a good idea. If someone has an idea and part of it's good, but I don't think it's really got legs, we'll explain why we think that way. Or what we'll say is, we can test it. Let's test it. The numbers don't lie. If you're adamant that you're the business owner and you want to run with this idea, let's put some budget behind it. Let's just see, because we'll be able to see in a week's time or 2 weeks' time how well it's performed. And I think that at its core is advertising. Like we said, it's not magic. I think the key word is test, you know, and we're always willing to try these things. If a client really wants to try something, you know, let's try it. Now, we're not opposed to that, but at the end of the day, we have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to present to them with the data and say, look, we did test this. We tested multiple different hooks and angles, and it's just not picking. It's just not picking up. But look at what we've done here. This is really working. Let's put a bit more budget in here.
100%.
You have to start somewhere with advertising.
You have to. And I think, again, another point that just came to mind is we speak on this kind of like in-house versus using a marketing agency. And I think a big reason why some people should, and do your due diligence, but use a marketing agency versus in-house, you have this, I'm trying to think of the right word, but certain mindset when you're in-house and you don't really think from an outside perspective. We work with multiple different businesses in multiple different industries, and we can sometimes translate things that are working in one to another. But when you're working in-house, you kind of are like blindsided to just your business or just your problem. There's so many different people out there, and not just looking at your competitors. In a completely different niche, we might have solved a specific problem that could be replicated here, or it's just a good test that we can implement. So I think that's another aspect of it as well. And again, to this full circle, a lot of businesses are just focusing on revenue. So I think the main thing that we bring to the table is actually focusing a little bit more on profit.
For sure. And I'd like to touch on what you've just said there about the whole agency versus in-house. This is something that we get sometimes from prospects or clients. You know, with the cost of your service, I could hire someone here full time, and you know, they could help with running the ads and they could help with packing orders and doing this. And it's like, you don't want someone that's an expert at what they do, packing orders. It doesn't even make sense. And what we offer, it's not based on our time, it's based on our expertise. 100%. Like I said, we're a team of 6. You know, we've got people that are even more experienced in the advertising industry than I or you, or close to. And we've selected those people based on what they know and their ability to translate information and their expertise. What the clients are paying for is our knowledge and expertise to be able to scale their business. It's not a time element. You should not compare time to expertise. The time in which it takes someone to do something has absolutely nothing to do with marketing strategy, with growing a business. And that's something that a lot of people or business owners that we prospect really struggle to understand. I think once they on board with us, then they truly see the value in what we do and how much it's helped scale their business. You know, we've had people that have been working from the start. And, you know, they'll say, you know, without you guys, this business wouldn't be where it is today. And on the flip side, what I always say back is, you guys have an amazing product at its core. 100%. You know, not to dumb down what we do, but you have a great product here. All we've done is get the right people in front of it and helped you to sell it. If it wasn't for your product, what we would do would have no effect anyway.
Not at all.
So that really is the balance between the business owners and what we do, you know?
Yeah, no, we definitely needs to all link together. I think, one thing I was going to mention, I've lost my train of thought a little bit, but I think one thing I was going to mention is, as you kind of get to this stage that we're at now, and I think I mentioned it before, we've got a team. We need to respect our team, and we cannot bring businesses in. Like, as much as sometimes things we can be like, oh, we could actually probably get this big jump here and we could probably get a good performance fee off of that. Like, we don't think in that way. We think of, is this going to be a good business to work with? But now we don't think in that aspect. It's like, is this going to be a good business for our team to work with? Because they've got to do a lot of the work here. Like, as much as, we're still, and myself, especially in certain areas of it, is like really in the groundworks of it. You need to make sure that the businesses that you bring in are good for your team, but you also need to think of the long-term investment of it as well. Because when we go into everything, it is really, we're not thinking like a couple of months here. We're thinking of years down the line. This is a long-term investment. We want to staple this person on our website. We want to be associated with these individuals. Okay. And I think we're both like this. We don't surround ourselves around loads of people. Like, yes, we might have different friends or associates, but we try to make sure that we surround ourselves around people that give us a good label ourselves as well, right? And I think that translates as well to business. We don't want our business to be associated with individuals that beat around the bush or do business in very dodgy ways. I think you need to remove yourself from that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of agencies go into business with anybody because they just want to make the money from it. But money is always made from long-term investments in people rather than just like short-term quick cash grabs. It never really works. I don't really know anybody over a long space of time that goes for these quick short-term cash grabs and has a long sustainable business or consistent income. It will just be up, down, up, down, up, down. And business is sometimes like that. But over a longer space of time, if you was to look at it on a macro perspective, you're going to see kind of that trend going up. If you're honest, transparent, you invest in the right people. But if you try to go for these short-term cash grabs, yes, on a small scale, it's similar to any business, up and down. But if you look on a long scale, it's actually probably coming down on a downtrend like that. So I think it's extremely important. Again, I know I've touched on it many, many times here, and I hope it translates well. We're investing in, as much as you're invested in us, we're investing in you. So we need to make sure it's the right person.
100%, 100%. I was going to touch on something and that slipped my mind as well. I was about to go and then it slipped. But what I will say is, maybe to someone that's watching this, that is maybe an e-commerce business owner, or maybe they run a service-based business, I'd suggest that they reach out. And we'll be honest as to whether or not we think we're the right people to help them, or whether or not paid ads is even the right thing for them right now, and it will all start with an audit, which we do free up front, and a personalized proposed strategy that even if they decide not to work with us, even though 90% of people tend to after an audit and proposed strategy, they could then take that information and then implement it themselves. But I think it's crazy. There's a lot of very successful businesses out there with massive holes in them, which I don't think they're even aware that these certain things are problems, or they don't understand the magnitude of it. I'll use the example we provided of, the business that was spending £10,000 a month and didn't even truly know what that was attributed, even though that's the primary source of their business and their traffic. So I think we're quite specialist in that sense of identifying the holes and the opportunities, whether it be a service-based business or an e-commerce-based business. Not to turn this podcast into a sales pitch, but I think it's really probably hopefully enjoyable for people to hear your journey, how we started the business and kind of how we've got to where we are today. And I think we just continue to grow on that. And I think that's what's most exciting about business and doing it together is we're never done. We're always working, and we're always working towards the next step and having bigger goals and ambitions. And one thing I'd like to maybe end on is what are your goals? Where do you kind of see this going? I know it's something we talk to each other about quite often, but like all things, often it can change. One of my goals for a long time was to relocate here to Dubai, and as I was saying to you just yesterday, I almost feel like I need to kind of set a new goal now. Not that I feel like I need a goal, but I always like to be working towards something. So for you, maybe what's your short-term goal for PDM? I know we're generally aligned on most things, but where do you kind of see this going in the next year or so?
I think two sides. There's PDM, and then as much as it is my personality, is me separate to that. I think from PDM's perspective, it's now very different to what it was in the beginning, because I'm now thinking through the lens of the team rather than just through our lens solely. So I think really what I personally would like here, and I know for the most part we kind of align on this, I think we work with e-commerce businesses, work with service-based business. For the most part, they are e-commerce based. I think it would be great, especially you starting our own e-commerce businesses within the company, because I feel like it'd be very exciting for the team as well. It's like, as much as they're investing in the clients that we're working with, it puts even more skin in the game for us, right? If we're coming to these e-commerce businesses doing it ourselves, I think it really shows testament to what we do.
Yeah.
So I'd say that would be one thing, scaling as much as we can, obviously, because then it allows us to incentivize the team. I think our thing has always been, to try to invest in a smaller amount of companies, but really invest in them and kind of go along the journey with them, which then obviously allows us to provide, value to ourselves and our team, monetary. But if I was to say myself, I think PDM always changes. I think mine also does change, but for the short term, I think I would say myself as an individual, as an explorer in any walk of life. I think you see it mainly in the business side of things. It's like, I like to explore these different avenues that we could potentially go down. The amount of times I've called you up and be like, Theo, right, I've got this new idea that we can go down within the business. I like to explore different opportunities, right time, right place. But I think for myself, I'm an explorer and I really do want to just continue to explore in the world. I feel like I have this fire in me when I'm in a new place, and it doesn't need to even be, it could be a poor place, it could be a wealthy place. I just want to see it all, if I'm honest with you. So I'd say short term for me is to just continue exploring, find the place that I can truly call home, because I feel like there's places where I feel like I do, but I can't say I truly have found that. But I might find I never find that. There might be multiple places around the world. So if I was to say from the PDM and the personal, it's like try to have the ability to invest in multiple different properties which I can live in when I'm there. And then as I move away, then I'm able to rent it. So I'm able to support myself not only through one avenue, multiple avenues. I'm able to travel around the world, live in beautiful places, be with my family. My family live on the complete other side of the world, Dominican Republic at the moment now. So, have the ability to be there, have the ability to be with you, to be in Europe, to create hubs for our team. I think I've mentioned a lot of time now that I've really seeing everything change now we have the team. Like for me, it's almost like, it's like our, not to put a weird word on it, but like our children now, right? Like we need to look after them.
We're responsible for the money that they earn, and hopefully the enjoyment that they get from working with us. But I think it sounds like the dream. I think let's work together and make it happen.
100%.
I think for now, we can continue exploring Dubai in the short term, continue scaling the agency, and when the time is right, dip our toes in ecom. After all, it is where I started, and it's what we do on a daily basis, grow ecom brands. So why not put that to good use and get back into the industry ourselves?
100%.
So I just want to say, Joe, absolute pleasure having you on. Obviously, I get to spend the rest of the week with you now anyway. So
he's stuck with me
this
now.
This is gonna continue. We'll still be talking. And to be honest, we should have just got like a camera to follow us around for the whole week, because we're only going to develop from here. But thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Cool. Appreciate it, brother.